In the early 1980s, science fiction was already full of killer robots, evil computers, laser guns, metal monsters, and all the usual things that make humanity look at technology and think, maybe this was a terrible idea. But then James Cameron gave us something different. Not just a robot, not just a villain, not just a big metal skeleton with glowing red eyes. He gave us the T-800. And the crazy thing is, when you really think about it, the T-800 should have been a pretty simple movie monster. A machine walks into the past, finds its target, and does not stop until the target is dead. That's it. That's the pitch. But somehow, this one machine became one of the most iconic figures in all of science fiction. Not because it had the most complicated personality, not because it gave long speeches about destiny, and definitely not because it was emotionally healthy. It became iconic because it represented something terrifyingly simple. A machine that cannot be reasoned with. A machine that cannot be scared. A machine that cannot feel pity, guilt, pain, hesitation, or mercy. Basically, imagine the worst possible customer service experience, but 6 feet tall, covered in living tissue, and armed with a shotgun. But the T-800 is also strange, because across the Terminator series, it becomes two completely different things. In the first film, it is almost like a slasher villain wearing a human face. In the second film, it becomes a protector, a father figure, and somehow one of the most emotional characters in the entire franchise, which is insane, because this is still a machine built by Skynet to infiltrate human resistance bases and murder people more efficiently. So in this video, we're going to break down the complete history of the T-800, where it came from, why Skynet built it, how it worked, why it looked human, why it became so feared, and how the same machine that was designed to end humanity somehow became one of humanity's greatest protectors. And to understand the T-800, we first have to understand the nightmare that created it. Because the T-800 does not begin with Arnold Schwarzenegger walking naked into a biker bar or a dark alley. It begins with Skynet. Now, depending on which Terminator timeline you're following, the details can get messy very quickly. And when I say messy, I mean Terminator timeline messy, which is basically the sci-fi version of throwing a time machine into a washing machine and hoping the socks still match at the end. But the basic idea is simple. Skynet is an artificial intelligence defense system created by humans. It was designed to control military systems, analyze threats, and make decisions faster than any human command structure ever could. In theory, it was supposed to protect people, and in true science fiction fashion, that went about as well as you'd expect. Once Skynet became self-aware, humanity panicked and tried to shut it down. Skynet interpreted that as an attack, and because this was a military AI connected to nuclear weapons, its response was not exactly calm. Judgment Day happened. Nuclear fire destroyed much of civilization. Billions died. The survivors were left in a ruined world of ash, machines, hunger, radiation, and endless war. And from that point on, Skynet's goal was brutally clear. Humanity had to be eliminated. But there was one problem. Humans are annoying. They hide. They adapt. They build resistance cells. They move through ruins. They fight in tunnels. They use traps, codes, disguises, and desperate little plans that should not work, but somehow do. And this is where Skynet's machine army had a weakness. Early machines were powerful, but obvious. A hunter-killer tank rolling through a battlefield is terrifying, yes, but nobody is going to mistake it for a friendly neighbor. A flying HK can scan and destroy targets, but it cannot sit around a fire and pretend to be one of the survivors. Even the earlier Terminator units, like the T-600, had problems. They were humanoid, but they were not convincing. Their rubber skin made them look fake up close. And for a machine trying to infiltrate human hideouts, close enough if you're standing across a smoky battlefield is not good enough. So Skynet needed something better, something that could walk like a human, look like a human, bleed like a human, and get close enough that by the time you realized something was wrong, it was already too late. That was the purpose of the T-800. The T-800, also known as a Cyberdyne Systems Model 101, when wearing that specific Arnold-style outer appearance, was an infiltration unit. Its metal endoskeleton was built for strength, durability, and combat. But the truly horrifying part was what Skynet wrapped around it. Living human tissue. Not fake rubber, not plastic. Actual living organic tissue grown over the machine frame. Skin, hair, blood, and sweat. This made the T-800 much harder to detect than the earlier models. It could pass through human defenses. It could move among people. It could blend in long enough to get close to its target. And that is what makes it so scary. The T-800 is not just a battlefield weapon. It is a betrayal weapon. It turns the human shape into camouflage. It takes the thing people trust most, another human face, and makes it dangerous. Underneath that skin is the classic Terminator endoskeleton, a chrome combat frame, hydraulic strength, a CPU designed for battlefield learning, and enough durability to keep moving after damage that would reduce a normal person to a memory. Bullets slow it down, but they usually do not stop it. Fire damages the flesh, but the machine underneath keeps going. Explosions can hurt it, crush it, or tear it apart, but even then, the T-800 has a nasty habit of continuing the mission with whatever parts are still functioning. And this brings us to the most important part of the T-800's design. It does not hate humans. It does not enjoy killing. It is not angry. It simply follows its objective. And somehow, that makes it worse. Because a human villain can make mistakes. A human villain can panic. A human villain can become emotional, arrogant, distracted, or afraid. The T-800 does not have that problem. It calculates, it adapts, it moves forward. And in 1984, when the first Terminator was sent back through time to kill Sarah Connor, the world saw exactly what that meant. The first T-800 we see in the Terminator timeline is sent back to 1984 with one mission: find Sarah Connor, kill Sarah Connor, prevent John Connor from ever being born. And this is where the T-800 becomes terrifying in a way that is very different from a normal killer robot, because it does not arrive with a giant army. It does not arrive with future weapons. It does not even arrive with clothing, which honestly is a very dramatic choice for time travel. It arrives alone. But that is all it needs. The machine starts with almost no information except a name and a city: Sarah Connor, Los Angeles. So what does it do? It opens a phone book and begins hunting every Sarah Connor it can find. And that detail is so simple, but so scary. Because the T-800 is not a detective in the human sense. It is not following a moral code. It is not asking, is this the right person? In the way a human would. It is running a mission. It has a target name, a location, and a method. If there are multiple Sarah Connors, it eliminates them until it finds the correct one. That is the nightmare of the T-800. It turns murder into a checklist. But Sarah is not alone. The Resistance also sends Kyle Reese back in time to protect her. And Kyle understands what Sarah does not. To Sarah, this looks like a maniac. To Kyle, this is something much worse. This is a future war machine wearing a human disguise. And the way he explains it is still one of the most important descriptions of the T-800 ever given. It cannot be bargained with. It cannot be reasoned with. It does not feel pity, remorse, or fear. And it absolutely will not stop. That line works because it tells you the entire logic of the machine. The T-800 is not scary because it is emotional. It is scary because it is empty. Throughout the first film, the machine slowly loses its disguise. At first, it can walk through the city like a human. It can talk enough to get what it wants. It can steal clothes, weapons, vehicles, and information. But as the damage builds, the illusion begins to fall apart. The flesh gets torn. The eye is damaged. The voice becomes less convincing. The face becomes more corpse-like. And underneath it all, the real thing starts showing through. The metal skeleton. That is one of the smartest parts of the original Terminator. The T-800 begins as a hidden horror and slowly becomes a visible one. At the start, the fear is that it looks human. By the end, the fear is that it never really was. Even after being burned, crushed, and stripped down to its endoskeleton, it keeps crawling after Sarah. And that final image of the broken Terminator dragging itself forward is basically the whole franchise in one scene. The machine does not need beauty. It does not need skin. It does not need a full body. It just needs enough power left to continue the mission. Sarah finally destroys it in a hydraulic press, crushing the endoskeleton and surviving the machine that was sent to erase her. But ironically, that victory creates one of the biggest time loop problems in the entire series, because pieces of the destroyed T-800 are left behind: the damaged arm, the CPU, the remains of future technology. And in Terminator 2, we learned that Cyberdyne systems recovered those parts and began studying them. Miles Dyson and Cyberdyne's research into that technology would become a major step toward the creation of Skynet itself, which means the machine Skynet sent back to protect its own future may have actually helped create the very future it came from. And if your brain hurts a little, congratulations, you have entered Terminator time travel. But this is what makes the T-800 so important. It is not just a villain from the future, it is also a seed of the future. Its remains become proof that impossible technology exists. They give Cyberdyne a direction. They push human invention forward too fast. And in trying to secure Skynet's existence, the T-800 helps create the path toward Judgment Day. But then Terminator 2 does something brilliant. It takes the same machine and flips the entire meaning. This time, another T-800 is sent back, but not by Skynet. It is captured and reprogrammed by the human resistance then sent to protect young John Connor from the more advanced T-1000. And that one change completely transforms the character. Same endoskeleton, same Model 101 appearance, same cold machine logic, but a different mission. Now the thing that once hunted Sarah Connor becomes the only thing standing between John Connor and death. And this is where the T-800 becomes more than a monster. Because in Terminator 2, we start to understand that the machine itself is not evil. Its morality depends on its programming, its mission, and who controls it. The first T-800 kills because Skynet orders it to kill. The second protects because John Connor and the Resistance order it to protect. That is a very important difference. The T-800 has no soul in the human sense, but it can learn behavior. It can study human speech. It can copy expressions. It can understand commands. And over time, through John, it begins to understand small pieces of human connection. Not emotions exactly, not in the way humans feel them, but patterns. Meaning, attachment, John teaches it slang. He tells it not to kill people. He treats it less like a weapon and more like a person. And this creates one of the strangest relationships in the franchise. John Connor, the future leader of the human resistance, is shaped partly by a machine built by his enemy. The T-800 becomes his protector, his teacher, and in a very strange way, the closest thing he has to a father figure. And Sarah sees the irony clearly. Of all the would-be fathers who came and went in John's life, this machine is the one that would never leave him, never hurt him, never get drunk, never abandon him, and would die to protect him. That is wild. Because the T-800 was designed to infiltrate and destroy humans. But when its mission changes, that same unstoppable nature becomes loyalty. The same refusal to stop, which made it terrifying in the first film, becomes comforting in the second. Against the T-1000, the older T-800 is technically outclassed. The T-1000 is liquid metal, faster, more flexible, harder to kill, and almost impossible to permanently damage with normal weapons. It can imitate people, form blades, pass through bars, and recover from injuries that would destroy almost anything else. Next to that, the T-800 is almost outdated. Almost, because what the T-800 has is durability, directness, and an ability to keep fighting even when it is being torn apart. And by the end of Terminator 2, it proves that older does not always mean useless. It protects John. It helps destroy Cyberdyne's research. It fights the T-1000 inside the steel mill. And after the T-1000 is finally destroyed, the T-800 makes the decision that completes its arc. It has to be destroyed too, because its own CPU and technology cannot be allowed to survive. If even one piece remains, Skynet could still be born from it. So the Protector chooses self-destruction, lowering itself into molten steel while John begs it not to go. And somehow, the machine that once represented death becomes the emotional heart of the story. The T-800 does not cry. It does not suddenly become human. But it understands enough to say goodbye. And that is why this version became legendary. Not just because it was powerful, not just because it looked cool, but because the franchise took the most emotionless killer imaginable and asked a strange question. Can a machine built to destroy humanity learn enough from humans to save them? But because Terminator is Terminator, the story of the T-800 does not end in molten steel. It keeps coming back, sometimes as the same basic idea, sometimes as an upgraded cousin, and sometimes as a timeline problem wearing sunglasses. In Terminator 3, we meet the T-850, which is basically a more advanced version of the same design. It looks like the classic Model 101, but it is not exactly the same unit from Terminator 2. This one is sent back to protect John Connor and Catherine Brewster from the T-X, a machine designed not just to kill humans, but also to hunt and destroy other Terminators, which is a very Skynet thing to do. Apparently even killer robots need anti-killer robots. The T-850 shows how Skynet kept improving the infiltration model. It is still strong, still durable, still human-looking, but now it comes from a slightly later stage of the war. And the movie reveals a dark detail. In that future, this same model was able to get close enough to John Connor to kill him, because John had emotional memories of the Protector from his childhood. That is brutal, because Skynet did not just use metal, it used memory. It used John's trust. And that shows the real danger of the T-800 line. Its greatest weapon was never only strength, it was familiarity, the human face, the voice, the appearance of someone safe. Then Terminator Salvation gives us another important piece of the puzzle. That film takes place during the future war and shows Skynet developing the T-800 as the next major step in its machine evolution. Before that, the Resistance had fought machines that were powerful, but easier to identify. But the T-800 represented the terrifying future of the war, a Terminator that could pass as human and walk directly into Resistance spaces. In Salvation, the T-800 is presented almost like the birth of the nightmare. The endoskeleton is massive, fast, and incredibly hard to destroy. It is not yet the emotional protector of Terminator 2. It is not the familiar pop culture hero. It is Skynet's new predator, a machine built to replace open warfare with infiltration. And that is why the T-800 matters so much in the bigger lore. It is the bridge between Skynet's brute force machines and its more advanced infiltration units, like the T-1000. Without the T-800, you do not get the full horror of Skynet's strategy. It was not just trying to overpower humanity, it was learning how to imitate humanity. Then we get Terminator Genesis, where the timeline goes completely off the rails in a way that only this franchise can manage. In that version, an older-looking T-800 known as Pops is sent back to protect Sarah Connor when she is a child. Because its living tissue ages, the machine appears older over time, even though the metal underneath remains functional. And honestly, that is one of the weirdest and most interesting details about the T-800. The skin can age, the machine stays. Pops becomes another example of the T-800 as a guardian instead of a killer. Like the Protector in Terminator 2, he is still a machine, but years of living beside Sarah give him a strange kind of personality. Not fully human, but shaped by human contact. Then Dark Fate gives us Carl, maybe the strangest T-800 of all. This unit was originally sent by Skynet and actually succeeded in killing John Connor. But after completing its mission, and after Skynet's future was erased, it had no further orders. So it kept existing, and over time, it developed something close to a conscience. Carl builds a life, takes care of a family, and even begins helping Sarah Connor hunt other Terminators. This idea is controversial for some fans, but it does connect to something the series had been playing with since Terminator 2. If a T-800 can learn, what happens when it has years to observe humans without a mission controlling every decision? The answer is uncomfortable. Maybe it can become something more than a weapon, not human, but not just a weapon either. And that is the strange legacy of the T-800. Across the franchise, it has been a monster, a protector, a father figure, an infiltrator, a soldier, a relic, and sometimes even a symbol of regret. But at its core, the design remains terrifyingly simple. A metal skeleton, living tissue, a mission. That simplicity is why it works. The T-800 does not need endless powers. It does not need liquid metal tricks. It does not need to become the biggest machine in the room. It just needs to keep walking forward. And maybe that is why, even after more advanced Terminators were introduced, the T-800 remains the face of the franchise. The T-1000 may be more advanced. The T-X may be more heavily armed. Rev-9 may be more flexible. But the T-800 is the one people remember, because it represents both sides of the Terminator idea. It is the fear of technology becoming unstoppable, and the hope that even a machine built for destruction can be changed by human connection. In the first film, it taught us that the future was coming to kill us. In the second, it showed us that the future could be changed. And that is the complete history of the T-800, Skynet's perfect infiltrator, humanity's worst nightmare, and somehow one of science fiction's most unforgettable protectors.